It's on. The January 21st meeting of the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission is now called to order. Dan, will you do the roll call, please?
Chair Clark.
Present.
Vice Chair McCann.
Present.
Commissioner Baker is excused. Commissioner Flanagan.
Present.
Commissioner Friedman.
Present.
Commissioner Futterman is excused. Commissioner Garrett.
Present.
Commissioner Gauthier.
Present.
Commissioner Goins, we have not heard from, nor Commissioner Miller may not be here. We're not positive. So we'll check with that. We do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. It was emailed and posted on Thursday, January 16th, per the city policy. Is there a motion to accept the agenda?
I move so.
Commissioner Flanagan, and a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Friedman. One point of discussion before we vote is that we recommend that we shift items around a little bit rather than wait until after the city manager and staff comments. We have a special presentation by Megan Gorig about the environmental film series. If it's okay with everybody, we'll do that before we do the city manager and staff comments. Okay? So all in favor of accepting the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Agenda is accepted. Thank you. So actually, I will first go to welcome and introductions. I welcome everybody here tonight. We have a large group in the audience, which is very much appreciated. Thank you for coming. And we do have a sign-up sheet going around so that we'll have a record of who's been here. So if you haven't signed the sign-up sheet, please do so. And then we'll move on to the presentation.
Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Megan Goring, and I am the manager of the Certified Farmers Markets of the Coachella Valley. I also help to curate the Sustainable Film Series, generously funded by the Sustainability Commission. I wanted to give an update on our list of films and some of the activities that we have planned prior to the film to add enrichment to the series. So we do have some promotional materials that I've brought along with me. I have posters and also cards that I'd like to share with the commission. If you have outlets where these can be shared, we really appreciate it. We, of course, share them at our theater, the Palm Springs Cultural Center, Camelot Theater, and then also through the 3 Certified Farmers Market locations. But we would really appreciate help promoting the series, both in person and also digitally as well. So if I could, I'd like to just go through the calendar and talk about each film. Should I go ahead and pass out some of these materials so everyone can take a look at them? So the film series in general is scheduled for either the 3rd or the 4th Thursday of the month, except for April. As it turns out, we have a big Earth Day celebration this year, and that falls on a Wednesday. So our April film is actually on Earth Day. Backing up to January, which is the film coming up soonest, on the 30th of January. Our first film in the series this year is Fantastic Fungi. And this is a film, obviously, about mushrooms, both wild and cultivated, and the amazing network that they create throughout the ecological world. Before that film, We actually have some local mushroom farmers. They're from Yucca Valley. Jim Schaefer and Stacy Andrews from Canyon Creek Mushrooms, and they're going to be talking about what got them interested in working in the mycological world, and they actually are going to be joining our farmers market soon, so we're really excited to have them speak. We also will be offering film goers mushroom appetizers from Tanya's Kitchen at the start of that film. Then in February, we're offering Paris to Pittsburgh, which is talking about climate change activism all around the world. And prior to that film, we're going to have a local climate activist, Jaya Daniel from Extinction Rebellion, Coachella Valley, do a short talk about her work as an activist in the Coachella Valley in the climate change debate. Then in March, our film is called Dreaming of a Better World. It happens to be scheduled on the 19th of March, which is the first day of spring, which is appropriate because this film talks about biodynamic farming, and one of the pioneers of that method of farming, kind of getting back to the basics and working with nature to create working with the environment method of agriculture. The filmmaker Bonnie Hawthorne will be with us for a Q&A prior to that film. She also lives in the high desert, so it's really convenient to have her come down. Then we also have a local date farmer that's from here in the Coachella Valley, Art Futterman, that a lot of his methods echo what's presented in the film. So he's going to come by and give his comments as well about sort of better than organic farming. And we will also be offering date appetizers at that film, provided by our new food and beverage director at the Camelot Cafe. Then, as I mentioned, in April, we have a special film for Earth that's actually showing on Earth Day. It's called I, Mariposa. And this film talks about the challenges of a butterfly sanctuary that's actually situated right on the border between the US and Mexico, and the challenges that they've had to deal with considering the difficulties on the border, and also disruption because of building a more fortified border wall. And for that event, we have Michaeline Gallagher from Sunnylands coming to speak about the work that Sunnylands has been doing to create a monarch flyover haven here in the Coachella Valley. They've been great partners with the farmers market and other events as well, but they really led the charge in getting more milkweed plants for the monarchs right here in the Coachella Valley. I also hopefully will have Christine Hammond come and possibly offer milkweed plants for filmgoers to purchase, and have some speakers from the Palm Springs High School Garden Club who also have been growing milkweed as well. We also have a connection to Karen from the Scrap Gallery, and her current work at the Scrap Gallery has to do with pollinators. And so we're hoping to have her bring in an activity for people that come to the film to participate in as well. Our last film is Anthropocene, and this film talks about how human beings have changed the world in massive ways, and it's a very visual film. It doesn't have a lot of narration, but it goes all around the world and shows all of the projects that have altered the landscape of the world. We're still seeking an activity and or speaker for that particular film. So if anyone has an idea of an activity or speaker, we are actively seeking that for our May film. So I wanted to let you know As far as the first film is concerned, we do have the film advertised on Eventbrite. And of course, all these films are free, but we encourage people to give us an RSVP, and we have over 30 people signed up to come to that film so far. So if you would like to look up on Eventbrite, that event, the Fantastic Fungi screening, Go Green screening, if you'd like to share that on social media or any other outlet that you have, we'd really appreciate that. I did provide some digital imagery to Patrick in an email earlier today. So if you'd like to share that imagery, we'd really appreciate it as well. Any questions?
Commissioner Rob. McCann.
I would have a suggestion for a speaker, but his name is Dr. David Grinspoon, and he's a world-renowned planetary scientist who wrote a book on the Anthropocene last year. But the issue is he's on the East Coast. Is there any budget for these speakers, or would you prefer they be local and free?
So we do have a budget. The budget does have to pay for the films themselves. That's the first cost that comes out of that budget. And it is provided by the Sustainability Commission. Of course, we could take a look at that, but having someone fly from the East Coast might be a little bit beyond our budget.
Okay, yeah, I thought I'd check.
We might be able to do a virtual, like Skype him in or something like that, since you've got that big old screen.
Yeah, absolutely. We've not done that for this series before, but that would be terrific. Yeah, if we can work that out.
Oh, okay.
Save our carbon.
Worth pursuing.
Any other questions for Megan? Commissioner Friedman.
Just a suggestion, if Patrick can get the digital version over to Denise Goolsby, then she can include it in Thursday's Office of Neighborhoods report, if that hasn't already happened. And I believe it's the 30th, and whether the digital version, but it's the 30th and not the 20th on the backside.
30th.
Yeah, and whether it's possible to correct it, but,
Ooh,
Oh, that's a.
yikes. Okay.
okay.
It is on the
whether
front,
you
it's
were-
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We'll make that change.
Commissioner Gauthier.
Just one more possible source for a speaker on the Anthropocene. The Western Science Center in Hemet has quite a bit of information about this era that we've entered, and they may have a scientist there that would be a good suitable speaker.
Thank you. Anyone that has suggestions, I'd be glad to receive those via my email, and we can sort of track them down and do some research to find out what might work best.
Great.
Sure, if you two could follow up with an email to Megan, just for the record, that would be good, with your suggestions. Any more questions for her? Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming. We look forward to the series, and you've really enhanced it this year.
We're very excited about this series too, and I hope to see many of you at the films themselves. Oh, I can. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and leave these. Where shall I leave these?
So now we'll move back up to the city manager and staff comments portion of our agenda. Patrick?
All right, thank you. So just a few brief comments about the recent council meetings. December 19th, we did a little community garden naming recap, which I'll talk a little more about in a minute. The building codes were presented for the first time on December 19th as well. There were no comments from council members on them. January 9th, the building codes were presented as a public hearing. Again, there were no public comments except for Commissioner Friedman, and so those sailed through. And then they also talked about, at the end of the day, the regular meeting time, which is going to be adjusted for all commission and committee meetings. So everything is going to start after 5:30, so it'll shift our agenda just a little bit, a half hour later. So we can talk more about how that affects us in the future. I don't think it's going to happen right away, but in the next couple of months, I think they'll decide. So.
And one other thing from that meeting is that the council members decided to disband the list of council members that are liaisons to the various commissions. And they formed two ad hoc subcommittees, or they will form two ad hoc subcommittees to look at recruiting and interviewing for commissions. And they'll also be looking at how the council interacts with the various commissions and boards. And that's really quite timely, since we talked about that in a meeting a month or two ago. We had some ideas, so more to come on that, but I expect we'll be involved in some discussions with the council on that.
So on January 30th, there is going to be a presentation on desert community energy. And so, as you all know, that's the process for changing over to a CCA, where we will basically own the energy and that it gets distributed to the city, so and its residents. So the letters will go out for that program in early February, so the presentation will just be announcing the fact that people are going to get letters announcing the program. And then there will also be a discussion item on the agenda to discuss how to approach handling low-income resident programs. So how those will be funded under DCE, maybe a little bit differently than they are now. So anyway, so that will be a discussion item at the January 30th meeting. We had originally intended for the climate action discussion to be on that January 30th agenda as well, but that looks like it's going to move to the first meeting in February. So more on that in a sec. And I think that is all we have coming up. There are a couple of other little things. We're going to try to get approval to go ahead with the turf conversion at Victoria Park, and we just have to basically present that to council because the cost of the contract to do that. And then there was one other thing I can't remember. That's also a consent calendar item. Anyway, I'll think about it. Yeah.
Was that the resolution that I drafted to repeal?
That was it.
Okay, yes.
Yes. So we also drafted a resolution to repeal the old solar policy, basically because we've developed a new solar policy. So it's really mostly a clerical sort of administrative action. So, all right. So hopefully I think that's in the queue to be on January 30th as well on the consent calendar. So, all right. The other thing, a couple of things I was going to mention. First of all, the climate action roadmap, I included that in your packet just as a heads up that was going to go forward to council. So it is virtually the same as the thing that you saw earlier a couple months ago. We did add in the staff report that's going to go along with that. We added some references to some of the items that we have discussed, especially at the Solar and Green Building Subcommittee level, in terms of things that we may not be pursuing right now, and some justification around that, so that council had some sense of things that we were thinking about, but not necessarily suggesting that they pursue at this time. So, so all of that is in the staff report and also the climate action roadmap. So that's going to be, again, put forward in probably at the first meeting in February. The other thing I was going to mention is the community garden naming ceremony. So some of you were there. It was very well attended, probably about 30 or 40 people. Michelle Mycian's parents her mother was there and her brother were there. Several community members came up and gave some comments, including two of the past commission members, Joe Jackson and Brett Klein. So anyway, so it was well attended, and the community garden looks great. You should go out there, take a look at it. And we're down to maybe 2 open plots, I think, at this point. So, okay, all right, no problem. Airport turf conversion replacement. So I had issued an RFP to get some design help for the airport turf conversion project, including a demonstration garden. And so I did receive a response to that RFP. And so I'm going to go through that, see if I've got any questions on it, and then probably move forward in the next month or so with starting that process. So more to follow on that at future meetings. I talked about DCE launch and outreach. There's going to be a lot of talk about the launch and outreach associated with it. David will probably say a few more words about the Community Advisor Committee role in that. And then greenhouse gas inventory update. I wanted to mention that I did reach out to the consultants who are helping us with the general plan update, and they were going to do a greenhouse gas inventory update as part of their work. And so I've gotten them to adjust the baseline that they were going to use for that to 2018 so that they can actually start on it now as opposed to wait until later in the year to start on it for 2019 data. So we're going to move forward with that. I just have to get them a little bit more data, and then we're going to work it into their current contract. And then the only other thing that is not on here is I wanted to mention that at the community garden naming ceremony, somebody came up to me and asked who was going to be the Green Citizen of the Year this year. And so I said, I don't know what that is. And so apparently we had a Green Citizen of the Year award for a few years. And it stopped back in, I think the last one was 2016. And so I have reinitiated that and announced it at the 1 PS meeting about a week and a half ago. And I've got applications here on the table. I passed some around to you as well. So if you know of folks out there that are doing amazing things with the environment that we might not know about, we'd love to hear about them and recognize them at the event. So there's I added a student category to this one. So I've reached out to Palm Springs High School, and I'll reach out to Lynn, to Yada at Desert Learning Academy to just let them know it's out there, and we'll see what kind of submissions we get. I did hedge a little bit in terms of the awards, so I said that we'd award at least two kind of overall winners, but then I said that we could recognize others for outstanding work in different areas if we felt that we wanted to do that. So anyway, take a look at that and certainly spread the word around about it. I'm going to get a press release out on it this week, and hopefully we'll get some more some applicants. So, and I think those were all the announcements I had.
Great. Thank you, Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
So the next item on the agenda is public comments. This time is for members of the public to address the Sustainability Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. The Commission values your comments, but pursuant to the Brown Act, cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. Is anybody here tonight to make public comment? Please come forward and you can sit at the table. And please state your name.
My name's Pete Hodges. I live in Palm Springs up against the mountain. And there are just four things that catch my attention. First is, I'm not sure in the mission statement, it says cultural and historical resources. I'm not sure what distinguishes those two. And I wonder why nature or natural resources aren't in that section of the statement. Second thing is just after that, it says, with responsible, sustainable economic growth. And it strikes me that we better I think the focus should probably be sustaining the environment before you focus on sustaining economic growth, because without a sustainable environment, there will be no sustainable economic growth for very long, at least. The next thing I'd just like to ask about is, in the Climate Action Roadmap, I wonder if there's a timetable and what the timetable is that the Sustainable Commission is operating on. If we're operating on that you have we're going to be sustainable by the year 2050 or 2100 or whatever. if that's just completely wrong according to the scientific data that says you better get it done before 2030, then, so I wonder what the timetable is. The roadmap should have a timetable. The fourth thing is that I ride my bike a lot, and I noticed that at the intersections, the green hand or the white hand will go up, but the green light will go up as well. And people aren't looking for people crossing the sidewalk and they turn into us. So it needs to be, if the green hand's on, there should be no green light on in that intersection because people are very vulnerable and we don't have cars around us that can, absorb the impact of someone making a simple mistake. So I think that maybe the sustainability, maybe if it says crosswalks and pedestrian safety, I think that might be something that you look at because it would seem reasonable that one party is able to move safely through the intersection at each time, rather than two parties going and one of them possibly running over the other. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is it on? Yeah. Good evening. Hi. I guess they have enough time to get to Stonewall. So I love the agenda, and Richard Noble, and I am the chair of the Climate Reality Project for Riverside County, and I have moved back to Palm Springs, so I'm here as a full-time resident, and I'm also a student for law enforcement on the environment and wildlife management at COD. I am feeling a little frustrated with Councilman Coors. The text between him and I go back and forth in emails. I spoke to you, a little bit of history. I organized the student strike here where we had 150 people show up in Congressman Ruiz's office. And I gave a press announcement punishing Cathedral City and Palm Desert for backing out of the DCE agreement, that Palm Springs is the only one moving forward. Now, I don't mind getting arrested in doing a sit-in in those meetings, and you may see me get arrested peacefully, non-violently, to tell these adults they need to start taking action right now. We're very concerned with the tribe. I'm very concerned with the tribe. I know that Councilman Coors was supposed to set up a meeting with the tribe for a joint debate on climate change and global warming in this city, and how we're going to move forward. I spent a lot of time on Google looking at what other communities are doing around the world. We don't need 30 million cars driving down Palm Canyon, with all the CO2 in our atmosphere. It needs to stop. And we need to decrease CO2 in our the 10 freeway. I don't know what we're going to do. The world is on fire, Sunday, I walked around downtown in my polar bear outfit with a sign that said, "Pray for Australia." I also showed up to the film awards, and I said, you saw me there? Make green films or carbon-free films. And I'm going to show up, and I'm going to be at every event until I see, I went to the outlets, and there were 30 Tesla outlets there. Those should be all up and down Palm Canyon. From Palm Canyon to the museum, that should only be for EVs, restricted. We need to take bold, forward-thinking actions because, as you read, last year our oceans are at their highest temperature. We've had fires in the Arctic region, in Australia. I don't need to preach to the choir, but for April 22nd, I asked a joint council meeting between the city and the tribe to get together. I want to bring in the wolves like I did 2 years ago for Earth Day. I got the $500 tree planted that has a plaque on there, and I know you guys are moving forward. Shortage of time. I do not see renewable energy in the DCE agreement. I see carbon-free energy, which is good. But I have also seen no movement between the contract between myself and the city to give to the vice president's lawyers that we are in a agreement to move to renewable, and that means hydropower. Like, what are we doing? Where is the hydropower coming in? I'm almost done. Are we protecting the environments and doing what we can for renewable energy when it comes to hydropower? If we are not, I can't call it renewable energy, and we shouldn't be telling the community that that's what it's called, because it's not. And if we're going to take responsibility for our planet, we need to do it 100% and educate the community on what the difference is between renewable and carbon-free. One is not the other, but one is the other. They don't know that. Mayor Moon didn't know that. The council is all like, what does that mean? We need to do a little bit better education, and I think that we will. And moving forward, you will see me a lot. I wish there was a position, I'd apply for it, because you guys are doing magical work, and I applaud you for your efforts and everything that I know your heart is in this like mine is. And there are people out there, kids that are scared to death of their future. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Mr. Noble. Anybody else for public comment? So the next item on the agenda that we'll move to is meeting minutes. The minutes from the December 17th meeting were emailed and posted Thursday, January 16th per city policy. Is there a motion to accept the minutes from December 17th?
Motion to accept.
Commissioner Flanagan, and a second? Okay, Commissioner Garrett. Is there any discussion on the minutes? So all in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Minutes have been accepted. Thank you. So next is the recycling report. Gary?
Good evening. The first item on the report is support for the solid waste franchise. Since our last meeting, we've corresponded with Andrew Smith at the state regarding two issues. One was the CRV numbers. Patrick came up with the notion that maybe we should try and collect the amount of CRV in the city. So we contacted Andrew, and he's going to send us a form that when we fill out and return it to the state, they will track the numbers and forward them to us, I would imagine, on a monthly basis. I also spoke briefly with Chris Cunningham just about general issues and any other matters that might pertain to both of us in the city, and also to coordinate with the shred event. The new beverage grant has been opened, and we'll fill that out, and I think they increased the amount of money, didn't they, from our 12 to 13 to almost 20,000. So that's good. The second item is special events. This past Saturday, we had a shred and e-waste event here at City Hall. We had 227 residents come through, and Desert Art collected e-waste. They got about a half a truckload full. It was a little less attendance than we've had in the past, but I can attribute that to Palm Springs Disposal not being with us in this particular event, and also it was a holiday weekend, Martin Luther King holiday weekend. So that's what I would attribute to being less participation. And the third one is the preparation for the annual report. There is none at this point. The fourth one is tracking legislation. There is no new legislation at this point that needs to be tracked. Attending meetings with city staff. I attended the solid waste subcommittee meeting as well as the Sustainability Commission meetings. And as far as performing other duties, I serviced the library and the police department for batteries and printer cartridges, and responded to residents' requests and picked up items that were left in vacant lots. The next item is to report the amount of recyclable materials. Do you have that?
No, we didn't collect all of the data that we needed yeah.
But we did recently receive numbers from Desert Arc, and for 2019, it was amazing. They collected, an amazing amount of cardboard. I don't know the number right off top.
Mm-hmm.
I think he said he does about 40 tons a week, so that's a lot of cardboard. And that's just Desert Art collecting, so it's really be interesting to see how much we do overall. So far, number 8 is a report on current legislation enforcement efforts. So far, we visited 94 businesses regarding AB 341, and we'll continue that effort. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Gary? I just have one comment. I noticed in the past few days, in major intersections around Albertsons, which is on North Sunrise, there are posters about a electronics recycling event. It's going to be this Saturday and Sunday, the 25th and 26th. It's a drop-off event. And I did note that at the bottom of the posters, it said, U.S. Kids Chamber of Commerce. So that must be a charity that this is going to support. But I was just interested to see that pop up. And so if anybody else has electronics, that's another place that they can drop them off.
Well, I would give a word of caution. We've had a lot of problems with those kinds of organizations in the past because they aren't always the most reputable, nor do they abide by the city's codes. So what I'll do tomorrow is I'll check with the permit department to see if they pulled a permit. And if they haven't, then I'll ask code enforcement to go out and deal with them. Because we've had events in the past where they put up all kinds of, they call them attention-getting devices, balloons and flyers and things like that, and they don't abide by any of the city's codes. And in one event that we had, they were actually trying to charge the residents to destroy their hard drive. They wanted to charge them $10. And so I sent them home, but I'll follow up with the permitting and with code enforcement if necessary.
Okay,
Thanks for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, and I did note the organization because I had never heard of it before. Okay. Commissioner Gauthier.
That event is not limited to Palm Springs. The signs are up by Target in Cathedral City and other places too. So just for your information.
Thank you.
The only other thing I'll add to Gary's report is that we have been trying to collect the data that we need to report out to you guys on a more regular basis in terms of all of the different recycling venues that are out there. And so we're close to having that report done, and we should have it done for next month to report out to you guys. So.
Great, thanks.
Did you happen to note any name of or the organization other than what you said?
The only other thing was that there was a phone number there, but I didn't write it down.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Now we'll move on to old business. And the first item is the single-use plastics ordinance.
Sure. So I just wanted to update folks on the single-use plastics ordinance. I included the most current version that responded to the comments that you guys provided at the last meeting. And then also I sent it around to our lawyers, and so I made a couple of edits to the document based on their feedback, as I noted in the email to everybody. For the most part, though, they didn't really have many comments on the draft, so that was, I thought, a good sign. So I think we're moving in the right direction on it. I did have a conversation with Councilmember Holstage, David Reddy, and Marcus Fuller in terms of how to move something forward to council. What we decided was that it would be best to hold a special session, not special session, study session with council to talk about it, because there are lots of details and lots of background that goes into it, and lots of things that they need to understand to make an informed decision about it. So I think there's still a strong desire to do something, and so I think it's really just a desire to have more time and more focused attention on it so that they can kind of figure it out and kind of be where we are in some of the thinking related to it. So that has not been scheduled yet, but I assume that will happen sooner rather than later. So I know that there are, I think, 3 or 4 study session topics that they're trying to schedule right now. So I think they're going to work on that here.
So that would be in an evening?
Most likely an evening, yes.
Yes. Commissioner Miller.
Will that be open to the public?
Yeah, and in fact, what I'd love to do is try to encourage some businesses to come to provide some input and thoughts. So, yeah.
Do you know how those study sessions will be broken out as far as subject?
So it'll be one study session. So we'll organize it, provide them with some background on the topic, present the contents of the draft ordinance most likely, and then sort of have a open discussion about their feedback and thoughts and questions and things like that. So I think I have not been to a study session, but I think they're a little bit more flexible than our council meetings. So there's a little bit more back and forth. And so I don't know also if we made it a joint study session with council and the commission, that you guys would be an active participant in that as well. So anyway, so we'll work to kind of organize it and figure it out how most productive it can be. So
Thank you.
And again, if you see anything in there, or you have questions about it. The one thing that I didn't quite address is your question about the caterers. So I got some feedback from our consultant about that, a couple of different ways we could do it. And so that might be something that we bring up at the commission meeting to talk about, because there are some nuances to it that we might want to just think about. So. Okay.
And what was the reason for removing the information about the city requirements?
So that was partly a judgment call on my part. There were so many questions that the lawyers had about each of those elements that I thought there's no way I'm going to resolve any of this before I wanted to get it out. So I'll have a more offline conversations with them about it and try to explain to them what we're trying to do and figure out if there's a better way to do that. I also think it probably belongs in more of a policy than it does necessarily in an ordinance. So we'll talk about that. Yep. Thanks.
With the small containers for the hotels in particular,
Yes.
According to the trade news, they embrace it. It gave them the opportunity to ditch that, which they didn't want to do. So just refilling things is less expensive for them, and it's better for them in every way. So I don't think there's any resistance. And also in the world of single plastic use, it was quite amazing news coming from China that because their problem is so severe, they're eliminating single plastic use almost immediately.
Wow.
And interestingly, even though ours were cups for hot coffee and cold drinks, one of their biggest problems is cutlery, which was strange that they're not using chopsticks, which were typically bamboo, and they always felt was a superior eating instrument compared to Western cutlery. So that has become their, throwaway cutlery has their biggest problem, including the plastic bags. So for China to do that is quite a major step. And if they're going to do it, we should be able to.
Sure. Okay. Just a quick update on the leaf blower enforcement enhancements that we discussed previously. I have worked with our attorneys again to make some modifications to our current ordinances to reflect those changes that we discussed. And I expect that those will go forward at the next council meeting. However, I did want to note that since December timeframe, when our code enforcement staff has been fully staffed, they are more free to go out and actually monitor compliance. And so the number of citations that have been issued this last month and a half have skyrocketed. So I think we've got about 30 or 40 violations that were issued. And I also reached out to the COPS program, the Community Policing Service, Citizens on Patrol, and raised this to them to suggest that this might be one of those things that they take on because they're always out there patrolling and looking because they do a lot of the traffic enforcement. So anyway, so I asked them to take a look at that, and so they're going to research whether or not that they can take that on too, because that would address one of the biggest pieces of our enhancement efforts, which was to try to beef up the enforcement process. So having more eyes on the street that are able to issue citations. So anyway, so we'll get some feedback on that and see how that goes. If they're able to do that, this combination of things may solve a lot of our problems. I also did want to note that I did get a visit from one of the landscape companies that got issued 2 citations recently and had one of their trucks towed. And so they were concerned because their feeling was that they had purchased defective devices, and those blowers were in the shop basically every week. And so they were trying to explain that that's why they were using their gas-powered leaf blowers. So I'm going to follow up with Yoshi Lawnmower Shop, which is where they take those two units, and find out a little bit more about them. I know one of them is a Steel brand, and Steel's been very good about replacing units that seem defective. So anyway, I'm going to follow up and talk to them about that. So more to follow on that. Yep.
With the gas blowers, they're still right downtown, right in downtown during busy hours in the morning on Indian Canyon.
Yeah.
Gasoline-driven ones, the guy
Really?
isn't wearing a mask or any kind of protective gear. I wasn't using a camera. I stopped this last time, which was just last weekend, to let him, and he didn't see me, so I stayed back. And then when he saw me, and I said, "Can I pass?" And as I passed, I could tell, and I said in a very friendly way to him, "Oh, that's gasoline. You know those are illegal now, and you don't have any protection." And like the presenter said, he was very rude to me, and I passed on and said, "Well, just so you know." But this is still quite common downtown.
Do you think they were working for one of the vendors? Like, they certainly weren't a city staff member.
No, it was a private maintenance or crew, and in fact, it was right in front of the offices for Palm Springs Life building.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, good to know.
Saturday morning.
Okay, thanks. All right. The next thing I wanted to mention was the EV charging locations. I have reached out to, we did get some feedback from Southern California Edison on some of the location questions that we had. And so I think that we're moving forward now with SCE to finalize the information that we need for each of the locations. Then I also reached out to a company called ChargePoint, and I'm going to set up a meeting with them, hopefully on Thursday, to talk more about implementation of our plan to install these additional chargers. So I'm going to have to do a staff report and present that to council and move forward based on their input and recommendation. But I wanted to just show you real quickly. Can you make that let's do a thing here. Basically, what we had talked about before is that we're going to make the chargers that are essentially in the main corridor of the city, those will be fee-based chargers. And so we'll collect the reimbursement for the energy use and a fee to use to maintain them. And then the other ones that are like our community parks will still remain free. So basically those are serving community members. And so for now, at least, that's the plan. The ones that are marked up there with an asterisk are brand new, so they are not in existence yet. So those would be brand new charging stations to added to the existing suite that we've got already. So that's a plan. It's moving forward finally, and I think we'll hopefully be in the ground. Our plan was to start to be in the ground in the March timeframe, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But certainly in the spring, early summer, I'm hopeful that we'll start digging and address the utility questions. Any questions about that? All right. So then the next topic is the flushable wipes topic, a follow-up to our last conversation about the request that we had to provide some support to an organization that's organizing around addressing some issues associated with flushable wipes. And I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Miller to talk more about that.
So, yeah, sorry I was late. I got actually a phone call that pertained to this, like, right before I was leaving. So, could I put the first slide on? That'd be the Titanic Toto.
We don't have that.
What, you didn't have that? Oh,
We never
shoot.
got it.
Okay. Well, another time.
Okay.
But I'm going to pass it around. This is actually, some of you have seen it. It's this gigantic, almost, it looks three-dimensional toilet with signage on it. It's for educational, obviously. It's not really functional. And actually, it's to remind me to say the rule now for what you flush down the toilet is the 3 Ps. So that's poop, and that's pee, and paper. And that's it. So anyway, I'll pass it around. And there are a number of other things. They're all worth, a talk. But the question came up last month was a little bit about the organizations that were requesting co-sponsorship. And this last phone call that I got was actually really good news. The letter that we had gotten was from, it's from Jessica Gauger of the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, CASA. And then the National Stewardship Action Council. They have very similar missions, and you can just see why they support each other back and forth all the time. And now, because of this, it's really ramped up so that the one I'm going to tell you about in a second is actually already got lobbyists out, which means, there's a pretty good chance that by the end of the year, we might really have something. That'd be great. So CASA, California Association of Sanitation Agencies, if you want to put that up, it's okay, we don't really need it. It provides leadership, advocacy, and information to our members, legislators, and the public, and promotes partnerships on clean water and beneficial reuse issues that protect public health and the environment. Their legal advocacy is around biosolids, climate change, energy, water recycling, and partnering with organizations. They have 128 cities and districts in California. They are the dominant organization like this for sanitation agencies in California. Their association members include 26 They're businesses, law firms, just a whole number of different private businesses, such as Energia, Best and Crygo, and Synagro. I figured those were ones that you probably knew of, but you can see how this is going. Okay, wet wipes, the vast majority are single-use plastics, frequently flushed down due to lack of consistent consumer information. This, the AB 1672 is what we want to get passed, and that is for labeling. And one of the most interesting things I found out, I wanted to show this to you. Would you mind putting this one up, Dan?
We never got them.
You never got
No,
them?
no.
Oh, okay. Anyway, it's called the International Water Services Flushability Group, if you can believe there's such thing. They have come up with the icon that will be on the packaging. I'll pass this around too. It's international because there are at least 8 countries that are involved in this, and in this particular work, it's their scientists that have come up with repeatable, valid testing to determine what is flushable. And the criteria that have to be met are they have to break into small pieces quickly, so that for your thin toilet paper, it takes 1 minute. For your softer toilet paper, it might take as much as 6 minutes. Not be buoyant. So buoyant is when it stays on the top, and if a condom makes it that far down the pike in the wastewater treatment plant, it's called a water lily. So that's what I was talking to you about this afternoon. It is not to contain, and you see the problem with it is it doesn't settle. that it can't contain plastic or regenerated cellulose, but only contain materials which will readily degrade in a range of natural environments. So it was fascinating to see the explanation of the tests and then to see in technical terms how they spell that out. So anybody that wants to go to court, like the plastics businesses, if they want to go to court about this, they've got clear definitions that have to be met. So I think it's pretty cool. Are there any other questions about this? Because I would again like to propose that the city of Palm Springs make a donation for co-sponsorship. Greg, you asked me about membership. Does it just mean that we get to go to their conferences? No, they do have conferences, and it might be a benefit for, one or two people, but that's clearly not why we would be doing it. We want to do it to make sure the bill gets passed so that our wastewater treatment plant isn't any more expensive than it needs to be, and that we don't have people having to go down and in the month of October, there were 46 under-the-ground dives, and 98% of those are from wipes. And how many of you lived in a world without wipes? I know I did. Baby wipes came first, but then there's wipes for everything now. And for some reason, it just automatically wants to go into the toilet. So that's all I have to say.
Can you remind us of the amount? Was it $1,500 or $1,000, the membership fee?
I thought it was 1,000.
$1,000, I think. I think you're right.
So there are two different organizations that
Sorry.
you mentioned, the NASC
Yes,
and the CASA. And
I don't know, we might have to wait on this again. In my conversation, which was as brief as I could possibly make it, it seems like both of these organizations are really holding hands on this. One is providing more of some services to get their bill through, and the other one is providing more on the other side, and more litigators, more lobbyists. And so it's possible, I couldn't really get it out of her, which specific group we'd be making the donation to. So that piece of information is not completed. I can tell you that pretty much this is the mission statement for both of them, but I can get more information and bring it back to you next time, but I think now they're really starting to go into people's offices, and they have their, and they also suggested coming down, and they'd be very happy to talk with you as well. Because they happen to be in a meeting up in Indian Wells right now, and they invited me to go tonight.
Oh, really? Okay.
So what do you think? Should we bring it to a vote? Or should we, it's hard to,
I brought the material that we had in our packet
right,
last month, and I looked at it this week, and it seems like it's the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, CASA, is the one that's really pushing for the passage of that bill, AB 1672, which is related to labeling. The other organization, National Stewardship Action Council, NSAC, basically is supporting that organization, and that's the organization that if we joined, we could get newsletters and so forth, that, things that you were talking about, or even if we didn't join it, we perhaps could make a donation to support that effort. So I guess the question is, what should we do?
I know.
Is this something that the commission wants to support? You've made a case for the problem. And the question is this something that we want to support? And then, if so, in what way? And then there would have to be a motion and a vote if we're ready to do that this week. If the commissioners still want more information, perhaps we can discuss it at the next meeting. I know we've discussed it twice now.
Yeah. I felt like we had talked about how we've already talked about this, what happens. But I kind of don't feel like we really have talked about it. I mean, the money that is thrown down the toilet, literally, when they have to go digging this stuff out, it is just unbelievable. It is an international problem. And, you know, if we can't get it right in California, I just don't know if there's some way that we could agree on it, or people actually not agreeing on it, or think this is the right way to go. Yeah, Jim.
No,
So-
I'm in agreement. I think it's a big problem, and I think it's an industry group versus some labeling that there's no real cohesive force against this industry group, so we can get some better labeling. So I think we should support it. I'm for it, but again, whichever one we need to write the check to, if we have money in our budget, it seems like $1,000 of political advocacy is a straightforward way to handle a much more expensive problem to our sanitation. And my pipes have been backed up because of them too, so it's cost me $5,000, but I'm in support of it if you have a path.
Commissioner Gauthier?
I agree with Jim, but I would rather, if there were a choice of which organization to be a member of, I'd rather go with CASA because it is a California-based organization and not membership. Dues would more likely be spent on efforts to solve this problem in California, which is
Well, actually, there is the California chapter in Sacramento is who they work with. So yes, it's national, but the action is going on in California.
that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I actually do have one more. Is there any issue with spending commission funding on political advocacy?
No, so we got some feedback from our lawyer right before our last meeting that indicated that this, and I presented him with all the information, and he said that it's a fine thing for us to spend money on if we so chose. So, yeah, since they are doing things that would directly benefit us as a city, then it's possible to spend money on that. And especially if we're joining as a member, that's certainly an easy thing to do. Membership is pretty easy.
And it appears from what I've read here that the membership would be with the National Stewardship Action Council, but their objective is to support CASA.
Right.
So the membership, anything that was paid or a membership would be with NSAC. Did you have a comment, Commissioner Garrett?
I was curious if you found on the manufacturing of it, because cellulose is just is reconstituted wood, like paper, but are they actually binding it somehow with the synthetic plastic?
You know, there's so many different products that I couldn't possibly, I probably wouldn't want to spend that much time doing that research.
But that's what would
There's
be keeping it.
There's so much that's just plastic that they make it to feel like fabric,
Right.
but it's plastic. That if there's something that's a little closer, it doesn't reassure me. And if it can pass the test, then it would be okay. But it's got to do a lot of other things. It can't float on the top. It has to break up in a certain period of time. See where it says in that process overview, it says screen. They fall down there and they're taking truck after truckload of those out, which go to landfill.
Also, what happens if, say, they get out to sea? How long do they last? No one knows.
Oh, yeah, they have all the testing. That was more information I could have given you. As a matter of fact, they have these tests where they shake them back and forth this way, and they look at them and they time them. And I mean, it's quite scientific, the way they test it. They wanted to be able to cover their behinds if taken to court. So, and it's appropriate.
Any other comments, questions?
So I guess it sounds like there's support for this. It's just a matter of the details of the motion to whether or not it's membership.
That's right.
Suggested membership or just a donation or what. So yeah.
Does it make a difference?
I don't know that it does. The only question I had maybe about membership is if it went forward as a membership, then membership is an annual thing and it would have to be renewed annually. So we would have to figure out if we just
Well,
want
of
to
course, by
do that
then, it'll be
annually.
passed.
It might be passed by then,
Yeah.
exactly.
But the other thing is that both of these organizations are working in an area that the Sustainability Commission is working in and will continue to do work in. So it's possible we might want to continue a relationship
Sure.
there.
Sure.
But I don't
Yeah.
know, I don't know about that.
One of the benefits that's listed here too for membership in NSAC is newsletters. So we would get information about what they're doing, which we might not get if we just made a donation.
Right. Right, that's
Just
true.
a thought.
Yep.
And there are free webinar registrations. Again, that would be a source of information.
Well, one thing I can say for sure, and that's that their main goal, it's not about membership, it's not about conferences, it's about getting this bill passed successfully in our state, and it would start in 2021.
So again, though, the membership would be to an organization that would advocate getting the bill passed. We could also express support to the organization that is trying to get the bill passed. So that's another option.
They both are. They are both
But they're-
intimately,
Well,
not intimate, they're, in very much great detail, they're working together
Right.
collaboratively. Here's the lobbyist over here, this one's doing the publicity. And the hope is too, is that we would all,
But the
I'm sorry,
question
Dave.
is, what should the commission do? Commissioner Friedman, you have a comment?
I would be supporting the membership as somebody who spends way too much time watching webinars, including one this morning. I find them very useful, particularly on state and national trends and best practices, and they tend to be fairly well organized, at least the ones that I go to in the energy sector. So I would support that. But sort of to add to the sort of the goal, which I certainly understand, having practiced water projects for many years, is I perhaps for the February meeting, we could get a motion from the commission to support this legislation, and that would go to council and ask council to send a letter to we don't have a state senator right now, but at least our state assembly member to indicate the support. And that's something, as somebody who goes to council all the time, that's something often that we see a letter from the city manager or the mayor expressing that. And it sounds from discussing with the city attorney, this would benefit the city wastewater treatment plant. So I would suggest that as an additional step to supporting the membership. And even if it's $1,000 a year, that is not excessive, I think, for the benefit that we get in terms of knowledge.
So that would be a two-pronged approach.
Yes.
One thing I should add is, on their cover letter that goes out regarding the bill, they have all of the cities and the districts and all of the logos of all of these organizations. They have a signature page that is 3 pages long. And so, yeah, they're doing that already with that. So I don't know if it'd be necessary to also get a letter out, if that would be the thumb on the balance or not. But in general, I think that's a great idea.
So it seems like there's considerable
Yes,
support. and
so
we-
there's support, and so I guess I will just say that the city will go ahead and join as a member, and we can put forward a motion if you want. It sounds like everybody's supportive of it, so I don't know how you want to.
I think because it's spending money, we probably
Yeah.
should have a motion.
Okay.
And a vote.
Okay. So do you want to do that now?
Would somebody like to make a motion, and this is specifically for becoming a member of the National Stewardship Action Council?
Yes, I would like to make that motion to become a co-sponsor of this bill through the National, what's it called? Stewardship Action Council.
Okay.
And actually, I do believe that is the correct council, after this brief conversation I had. So, the National Stewardship Action, well, I just screwed up that, didn't I? So,
Okay, so the motion is to become a member of the National
Okay.
Stewardship Action
I think what we're
Council.
going for is co-sponsorship of the bill. We-
But I think that's something different. And I think what Commissioner Friedman was talking about is more along those lines, where we would ask council to make a resolution to the state legislature to support the passage of the bill. So those are two different things, and we can certainly do both, if that's the
agree.
desire of the
That is a
commission.
good idea.
So,
Someone would like to try and do that one again, or get a
So-
clear motion.
when we go through this motion and vote, I'm going to ask Commissioner Friedman to do something for the next meeting. But I'd like to focus on, we have a motion that the Sustainability Commission become a member of the National Stewardship Action Council. And we know it's $1,000 per year. Is there a second?
I thought it was the city that's becoming.
The city is becoming a
It's
member.
not the
Okay.
commission
The commission.
becoming a
Well,
member.
okay, so,
The city
The
supports
Sustainability Commission is approving up to $1,500 for the city to become a
Right.
member of.
so can we approve,
You
is it
can-
our budget, or is it?
You can recommend that the city become a member of that council,
Okay,
that
so-
organization.
Some, we haven't seconded the motion, so we need to clarify the motion. That's, so it's we make a recommendation that the city becomes a member of NSAC.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
And SAC, correct.
Okay, my misunderstanding, but that's been clarified. It would be the city, we would make that recommendation for them to use their budget. Okay. So is there a second?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, it's our budget, but they authorize it. Okay.
Chair, I'll second that motion.
Okay. Okay, so again, recommendation that the city become a member of NSAC, and they will use the sustainability budget for that membership, but it would have to be approved by the city.
Can we just add the at $1,000 level, just in case there are other levels of membership?
Okay, right, so the motion includes at the cost of $1,000.
There you go.
Okay. Any more discussion on that motion? Okay, so, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay. Passes unanimously.
Great.
So, then to the other item that had been proposed, that we asked the council to support the passage of the bill. Commissioner Friedman, could you come up with a resolution for us to vote on at the February meeting?
What I'll do is, perhaps in anticipation it'll make it go faster for council, is prepare something, and then it would just get slotted in for the consent calendar. And those are fairly simple. And there's basically a letter that, I can circulate and work with staff on. And it sounds like this is on the sort of current legislative. The legislature's, I think, about to walk in the door if they haven't already. So it's on this, so the sooner we get it, that letter in, I think. So I'll do that. That'll come to our next meeting, and then it can probably, hopefully, get slotted into council, right after, 1 or 2 meetings after that.
Okay.
It'll just be faster to get it on the consent calendar that way.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you. Commissioner Gauthier?
In our next board packet then for the February meeting, can we have the language of the bill included in there so that we know what we're,
Yeah, there's probably, I'll do the research, but I'm sure there's a legislative summary.
Right.
And if necessary, particularly perhaps Patrick can give me, if there's anybody to call, or Brad, you have the name person call.
Yeah, I'll let me work with you on that, on the people and the document.
Yeah.
That will be useful to you.
Yeah, and I can just do it sort of in resolution speak pretty quickly.
And I appreciate your collaboration.
Thank you. So I think we're done with this item in the agenda. Thank you all very much. That was a very good discussion. And I'm glad that we were able to move forward. So now we move on to new business. And the one item there is the 1PS annual picnic. There's a motion written there, but I'm going to turn the meeting over to Co-Chair McCann because I'm a voting member of the 1PS board and I need to recuse myself from that discussion.
And the motion before us is to approve sponsorship of the 1PS picnic at the $500 level. I'll remind you that this is the same amount of money that we approved last year for this. Is there a commissioner willing to move this forward for consideration?
I so move.
And a second. Is there any discussion on this topic?
One discussion, which is vaguely also related to DCE, but that we coordinate the commission's presence at the booth with the folks from DCE and Lift to Rise, just to see how that might work.
Yeah, I was just talking to Dan about that this morning. There's lots of tables we need this year.
Yeah, I've already given them the information, and they can pay their $25, to come down there, but it might take a little explaining, so, to the committee that's putting this on. So I'll go to that meeting. It's coming this Monday. But just explain, like, we need 2 tables. The Sustainability Commission needs 2 tables. And we need to get our logo in there very quickly. And we're going to have, DCE is going to have their own table. And as it turns out, so is Veolia going to have their own spot. They have a fancy table. They're going to put it up.
So is there an additional issue we need to consider here to get because we had 3 tables last year? No. All right,
We'll just coordinate with the planning committee to make sure we've got enough.
All right, if there's no more discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And I'll return the meeting to Chair Clark.
Thank you. So now we move on to subcommittee and commissioner reports. The first one is Standing Subcommittee on Solar and Green Building. Commissioner Friedman.
Okay, Patrick covered my first 2 bullet points here. The building codes passed finally on January 9th, and so that's the energy code included in that immediate effect. That's where the solar requirement becomes law, or is now law. And then as a cleanup, the solar policy from 2018 is preempted, superseded by the state rules. So we've got a cleanup resolution there, and that'll come before council. Patrick also alluded to the work that I've been doing with him over the last week or so on the Climate Action Roadmap. And if you recall, I had presented to the commission a list of what the other cities, particularly in Northern California, are doing and continue to do on various matters that exceed the energy code, and those are now being approved by the Energy Commission at their monthly meetings. And as I noted in the report, and it'll be in the the staff report covering the Climate Action Roadmap, is these are all great ideas that other cities are doing, but in each case there are substantial upfront costs for housing. While they're all cost effective in the long run, they do require additional energy efficiency measures. Nearly all of them require Energy Commission approval, and some have gotten strong stakeholder opposition, including lawsuits. So while that's for council to consider, and I had a brief conversation with Mayor Pro Tem Holstage at an event in town the other day, and I think she's aware of what's coming through. What I've done as sort of an immediate action, and you have in your package, is a draft ordinance that we had discussed, or I had alluded to in previous meetings, and that is linked to DCE, and I'll talk about that as Patrick mentioned, we're launching in April. But this is an ordinance that's something that we can take action immediately to sort of respond to the comment, the public comment. What can we do now? This is already consistent with city policy. City council has already voted to automatically enroll everyone in the carbon-free option, which is 50% renewable and 50% hydrocarbon. And the ordinance that I've drafted, which is based on something that San Francisco has done, essentially says that buildings over a certain size and the indoor grow cannabis facilities, there are only 4 that are currently licensed for that, have to use renewable energy, carbon-free energy more accurately, and they can do that simply by staying on DCE. So that's something that I've done that does not require any other governmental approval. All of the program implementation is through DCE, so the city wouldn't actually have to sort of spend staff time doing this. And it's, if you will, kind of low-hanging fruit. What can we do now? I think I mentioned that the estimate from DCE is that the carbon-free option will immediately reduce our GHG emissions by close to 30%. It's a very large reduction. So this is something that we can do that reinforces that message and keeps us on the path, because there are strong goals, both 80% reduction by 2050, but there's also an interim reduction requirement of 40% reduction below 1990 levels by 2030, and that's among the state goals. I think it's post-sustainability plan, so it's not mentioned in the plan, but it is a state goal that's come through in the most recent legislation. So that's essentially a quick summary of the ordinance. There's a few exceptions for sort of hardship. If the rates go above 15%, they're currently slated to be roughly 10% above the SE rate. That can be focused. Obviously, we're not trying to lock people in if it becomes financially burdensome, so there is a kind of a safety valve in there to provide for any alternatives, and obviously if it's already covered by other state legislation that might come into effect. So that's a quick summary of the ordinance. If you've had any, I'm happy to answer any questions, and we can discuss it once again at the Green Building Solar Committee meeting in February, and then bring it back to the commission for a vote. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have now, or you can just refer them to Patrick, and then we can discuss it at the meeting, our committee meeting in 2 weeks. Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
It sounds like a decision was made on the net metering, and Patrick told me about it, but I'd be interested, I think other people would be too, about the ultimate solution. The ultimate vote came down in favor of net metering.
Can I just defer that to the CAC, the DC report at the end of the agenda?
Yes,
Because it's
yes, I'm
somewhat
sorry.
different.
Yep,
They're
absolutely.
not directly related, because this is independent, this does not. Once again, the advantage of this ordinance is it doesn't require anybody to do anything other than it simply says, don't leave DCE. You're in DCE, please stay there. So it doesn't require any solar or anything like that.
So the only question that I have that I would like to explore with you a little bit, because we will probably have to do it as part of a staff report, is to explore the cost question a little bit more, to see if we can somehow get some information about energy use, about some buildings or something like that, to give a sense of, even if it's just kind of exemplary, to say, this is how much more this might cost a month or something for these businesses.
And I'm happy, as you recall from the DC board meeting, there is some information in that staff report, and I can work with the folks with Benjamin and Katie to see if they have additional support to sort of look at that, because they probably, my understanding is that was just one example, and they probably have more examples that we can do that. And then you're also going to be looking at getting some sort of building population size, because that, I think, is definitely a question the council will raise.
Yep.
Just how many buildings do we have in each building size? Because the cannabis stuff is easy, because that's all published, and I already got those numbers. But we need to know, do we have how many 100,000 square foot buildings do we have? And some of those, in particular the hospital, may be direct access. So there would be actually a requirement for them to do that. So that may essentially put them onto DC. But anyway, we would need to get that information.
So that's additional information that would go in the staff report.
That would go in the staff report. I think we can, yeah.
So I think the only other thing I would mention about that is that even though it would go into, and I've become a little bit more conscious of this, but I think even though it's just going to go into the staff report, it might be something that the commission wants to see as part of your decision to vote, because I think we need to be more conscious of those kinds of things as we go forward with these resolutions. Same thing with the plastics and things like that, to just have a little bit more data.
Yeah, I mean, if you can I will get the cost data from Benjamin and Katie, and if you can try and rustle up some building data, and if we get that, I'll at least get what I can between now and Green Building Solar, and if we can get that in time for the February meeting, and the advantages of the more we can get now, the faster this can then go to council reasonably contemporaneous with the DC launch in April.
I think that's a good suggestion. You wrote a really excellent staff report, but having that information about building size and costs, I think would be good support for the commission when we're ready to take a vote.
Yeah, and the other point, and I mentioned this also to Mayor Holsich, and this is in the report, is this really should, even before going to full city council, we should probably run it by the business retention subcommittee, because this clearly is directly affecting the business community. So that would be a step, and get their feedback, positive, negative, or comments before it goes to the full council.
Thank you, Commissioner Friedman.
That is, I think, it that I have on solar green building requests. Okay. Commissioner Flanagan, has anything that you'd add?
Okay. So then we'll move on to Standing Subcommittee on Waste Reduction. Patrick.
So you have the report in your packets. A couple of things to highlight. Since our last discussion, we did move forward a little bit with the Cultural Center project. The center has moved forward with purchasing recycling containers based on some recommendations we provided to them. So those should be in place soon, I hope. For the International Film Festival, we provided them again with our recycling containers so that they use those during the event. I need to get some feedback from them on how well that worked. We did not provide them with any signage this time, so it will be interesting to see if there was a difference in their opinion. The other thing they are moving forward on is their bottle filler, so they'll be installing that probably this month, so that they'll have that in place so that people can reduce their plastics use. I have rustled up some additional graphics, some dirty graphics for our signage. So I'll share those with you guys here. I'll just email them to you, see what you think of them. And then we'll incorporate them into our graphics so that we can get our signs underway. And let's see, I think those were the couple of things I wanted to mention. Rob, Commissioner McCann, did you want to say anything more about the whatchamacallit project that you're working on?
The Desert Learning Academy.
Yeah.
Data collection's proceeding. We did our second data collection on the baseline, which is the existing trash containers, last Wednesday, and there will be another one tomorrow. There is only one more scheduled for that baseline, and as I said in the last meeting, this one's turned into a more targeted but interesting scientific study than first envisioned. There's very little recycled material that's going into these trash containers. It's all food material and food waste. So that's good though, because now we'll have a baseline for when we put recycle containers in there to find out how much of that material is being put into the recycle containers.
Only other thing I wanted to mention is, as I mentioned, I think in our last meeting, we were moving forward with this idea of a neighborhood challenge with 1PS. And so I've got a little team together of 1PS representatives. We're going to meet on January 30th in the morning. and talk about how that might be implemented. And some of the things that we'll ask them to do are waste related. So, do some street audits and street cleanups and that kind of thing. So that's moving forward. And then the only other thing is we wanted to talk a little bit about the work and research that we're doing with regard to the wastewater treatment plant and some of the greenhouse gas emissions associated with that. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Okay.
Can I lift this up and carry it around? Does that work? Oh,
It's wireless, so yeah, I think you can.
wow.
I don't think we've ever had anybody do that before.
Okay, so this is about biogas to energy at the wastewater treatment plant. And I just simply wanted to use this lovely, lovely schematic. Did we get the slides on
Yes.
this one? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
this one over here, this was something that Patrick came up with in very short notice, and I was very impressed with it. This is what it ostensibly does take out the wipes, and what a mess it is. So anyway, it's the screen that supposedly does it. But just to, I guess I'm getting some feedback. Does this sound okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. So just coming through here, there's the primary clarifier, secondary clarifier, and you see there's a water bubbling, oxygen coming up through the bubbles here that helps to separate things. So this grit comes out here. This is a finer quality grit and organic material. Right here it's where 75% of the water that we receive from these sources goes to DWA, where they put UV light on it and some chlorine before it goes to the green belt. But apparently, and someone in here knows more about this than I do, they add a lot of nitrogen as a fertilizer, something I think we get into later in our agenda. So anyway, we're coming down here, and we have a gravity thickener. Now this last 25% is getting thicker and thicker, and you've got a pretty thick slurry of very organic fluid in the anaerobic digester. Well, there's two, actually. And here we have an open flare. Now, I just wanted to clarify that the flare is not effective in getting rid of greenhouse gas emissions. The flare, number one, because it's open, it never can reach the temperature that it needs to reach to essentially burn off the methane. And so to see that open flare, it only means it's there so that it doesn't explode, but it does not, in that state, go on to produce anything of any use other than greenhouse gases that go up into the atmosphere. Okay, so just statistically, on October of this last year, there were 2 million cubic feet produced a day of greenhouse gas emissions from that flare. 2 million cubic feet a day. Now, I want you to note the location. It's at the edge of DeMuth Park and a very large neighborhood. So if there's one place that is at risk for environmental justice issues, this is it. And the last 2 Mondays, I don't know what they do on Mondays, but the last 2 Mondays, it stunk to high hell. I mean, it was really, really bad, and I wouldn't want to live across the street from it. I wouldn't want to live anywhere in that area, because even though this updated system has only been, it's less than a year and a half old, still the stench is a problem. So what kind of energy could we do? What could we make out of this open flare? Well, going to CNG is very popular. It was probably requires the least stringent technology. But I don't know that that's our best way to go in terms of clean energy, because it's really not that clean. We also have, we can turn that into gas that can be purified considerably more than it is, and it can go into the Southern California gas line, as it does up in Paris, in the biodigester there. Or it can be turned into electricity. So a little bit more on this as we go, as I talk about some of these things. When they updated this wastewater treatment plan, they also instituted a small solar farm, and they were sure that it was going to take care of all of their needs, energy-wise. But as it turns out, much to their concern, it only collects enough solar to cover 60 to 70% of their electrical needs. So they're still requiring quite a bit of energy. It's an energy-intensive business. Let's see, what was my next? Okay. So we've been talking about this greenhouse gas emission inventory that was done now back in, let's see, what do we have here? Thank you. 2010 to 2012. And, you know, why is it really producing that much, and how are we comparing with other things? So that is what I want you to look at now. And you see in the yellow, the 200 one, let's see, no, I guess it would be the 208 was an actual reading of it. And those are in million CO2 equivalents. In other words, if it's methane, it's going to be 25 times as damaging as CO2. So they put it all, to call it one thing, they put it all in CO2 equivalents. But you can see then back in 2012, as they projected forward, there was, I can hardly read it myself, it's 15,957 million carbon dioxide equivalents per year. So you drop down through some of those other categories, and you can see the total is, it represents what the wastewater treatment plant is putting out. It represents about 50%, according to this projection. Now, it's interesting to note now that, see, on the very bottom it says Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions. Does everybody know what that means? Those, we're going to see a lot of those coming up in the future. Scope 1 emissions is actually just the bare bones of what it takes energetically to run the plant. Scope 2 more falls in line with the trucks and other things that aren't directly involved. And then Scope 3 is, how do the employees get to the plant? And so when you're talking about fixing the problem, there are all these levels of how to fix the problem. And the one last thing I'd like to say on this particular chart is that on this chart, it says wastewater treatment plant, I'll say 2012, 15,957, but Lamb Canyon is not included in this, which represents probably, let's see, 4 or 5 times as much. And yet, I don't know how we got away with doing a greenhouse gas emission inventory and not include Lamb Canyon. because we know exactly what we're putting into Lamb Canyon. Why would that not be included in our inventory?
It is in there. It's included. It's included as a factor of the waste that we produce. So it's included. It doesn't specifically assign it to a landfill, but it calculates an emissions factor based on the amount of waste that we produce. So it should be.
It's not on this.
It's not on that, but I don't know what that is. So I can't.
Well, when you compare, and it's been done many times before, when you compare the White House gas fugitive emissions, it is a small fraction compared to the landfill. Okay, I'll get on with the point on that. So what is the main component of the open flare? It's food. It's what it is. And why would we use foods for this? Well, has a high energy potential because it's so carbonaceous. It represents a large percentage of solid waste stream, of the solid waste stream to landfill. In fact, they did. Let's see. I'll run into it. It turns out that, I must have skipped it. Yes, okay. In 2014, they did a waste characterization study. Food is the second largest source of solid waste in California, 29% residential, 39% commercial. So going on from that, diversion from landfill through food waste digestion, that's a good thing. We certainly need to do that. And then digestion may be the highest and best use of food waste. This is the EBUD, the East Bay Municipal Utilities District combined with EPA. And you can see those are the trucks. One truck will power 260 homes. So if we can go to that last slide. The EPA, the food recovery hierarchy. The EPA put this out fairly recently. They've studied now how to get rid of food. It is a huge source of our waste, whether it's residential or commercial. And so source reduction, reduce the volume of surplus in food generation. Yes, we have to do this. There are programs to do this. We'll do this. Feed hungry people. Yes, we'll do this. This is, something that we can do. Feed animals. Yes, we can do this. These are smaller, these are higher apples on the tree. But this is what really blew me away, is industrial uses. Industrial conversion of food waste to energy is preferable over composting or landfill to alleviate environmental and economic issues associated with food waste while increasing clean energy sources. So, in 2015, a letter of interest was sent to Veolia and B&E. It's a biogas. It was an upstart that got a lot of money from the state to start this new program that would dovetail nicely with our wastewater treatment plan. It would be at the level of converting, because you've got to clean up this gas before you can put it in, make it CNG out of it, for instance. You've got to clean it of a lot of the stuff that it's got in it. But even reading that over, when you read about the technology that's being suggested, it's like old. I mean, I can tell it's like the old stuff. It's a long, long time ago. And times have changed, and the time is right. Because we not only have all the state mandates and SB 1383 being the mother of them all. I mean, this is incredible for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and they're serious when they came out with that. Grants, there are more grants. They're on the rise. Public outcry. Look at all we've had in the last year about the climate crisis. And then we have a tremendous amount of tech that's gotten developed just over the last couple of years. And the tech both saves money and actually enables treatment plants to gain money from it. They are selling the energy, whatever it might be, as a profit. Not only can they pay for the whole outfit, but they can now sell it back to Southern California Edison. The possibilities are just amazing. Plus, we have a distinct advantage because the wastewater treatment plant is sitting right next to a Southern California Edison transfer spot. And so here you have the grid right there. And then on the corner, they've just agreed to allow the building of this enormous industrial battery. So it's a battery for clean energy. I think, that's pretty obvious. So I'm just kind of keeping you appraised at where we are right now. I will say that Doug Glore, who is the manager, has been very, very helpful. He and I have spent hours together working on like that schematic. And some of these other aspects, I have many more questions to ask, but he's all for it. He wants to do this. So
thank you for bringing up to speed. These are things that we've discussed in our waste reduction subcommittee, and clearly a lot more work will be done in the future.
there's interest
Yes.
in our city.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Any comment?
Yeah, I
Commissioner
would just
Friedman?
note, because I think this is, those of us, I think most of us by now have gone to the anaerobic digestion facility, and that's absolutely fascinating. I recall from that there's a lot of state money between the Energy Commission and the PUC to do these things, and I think a large part of the Paris facility got financed from grants from some folks in the state, so that's certainly something that can be looked at. There are kind of two alternatives. You can convert to gas, and I'm well aware of the battery and the station and everything, because I think it's come up at DWA. And also sort of potential source of money is that as part of this whole decarbonization debate, the gas company is saying, well, don't mandate just all electric because we're moving forward with renewable natural gas. And so there may also be some support potentially from the gas company, because there really isn't an awful lot of renewable natural gas out there. And the gas company is pushing renewable natural gas as an alternative to the all-electric models that are particularly in Northern California. So I guess all I'm saying is that you can convert it to electricity or try to turn it into renewable natural gas, but there are pots of money that can help support those efforts that, we can explore as part of those discussions.
Thank you, Commissioner Friedman. Any other comments?
I just have one other, I forgot to mention, we are already collecting commercial food waste. We're sending it, I don't know how many miles it is, down to the landfill drop-off site that basically, not landfill, it's actually a composting place, and they've just agreed to take it, but as far as I can tell, I haven't researched it thoroughly, but it's a funky outfit. It does not seem to really do what it's supposed to be doing, but we have PSDS driving trucks down there toting the commercial waste. Many communities have instead taken the commercial food waste and send it to their wastewater treatment plant. And there are a number of case reports that EPA has recently put out where they made their budget so they planned on not making any money. And then they were just very shocked to find, lo and behold, they have a product and they're making money on it. So times have changed.
Thank you. So we'll move on now to Standing Subcommittee on World Environment Day. I do know Commissioner Futterman said that she's scheduled a meeting for next week, so we'll get more information at our meeting in February. Then
I did have one comment
sorry.
on that, and I don't recall if we approved a budget for this year's World Environment Day or not.
I don't think we did.
but,
No.
So maybe Jennifer will want to bring that in February. But we have gotten a bid from the graphic designer and photographer for redesign for this year's billboard and flyers and posters, and reuse of the photography in those was quite reasonable, so we'll bring that in February.
Okay, so you can cover that in your meeting and bring it back in February. So, thank you. Commissioner Garrett?
I had not been notified of that meeting.
No, it hasn't been scheduled yet.
Oh, okay. Well, that helps. I didn't miss that. But on my end, as I've been working towards that, Greta Thunberg is in Davos right now, so there hasn't been an outright no, but I'll intensify efforts once she returns home again. And along with that, it's brought up that there are several other of her peers here in the United States that they suggest that we might also contact, in addition to Greta, or if we can't work out a Skype or some type of cyber connection to speak to the students and the young people here particularly. And in addition to that, I just last week did initial outreach to the agents for both Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin, who were clients of mine in the past. And I thought, well, they're out right now doing environmental rallies and that. So I'm hoping that maybe we could get at least one of them, or how great if we could get Greta, her American peers, as well as Lily and Jane. So anyway, we're working towards that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ad hoc Subcommittee on Earth Day, Commissioner Baker is not here. Patrick, do you have anything more to add?
No, nothing more to add. I mentioned the Neighborhood Challenge that we're organizing and the Green Citizen Award, so
Right, okay.
covered.
Thank you. Ad hoc Subcommittee on Walkability and Pedestrian Planning, Commissioner Gauthier?
Nothing up.
And that's going to be the Safe Routes to Schools, and we still don't have the consultant, right?
No.
Okay.
I did express to them the urgency of having somebody in place before the March 21st 1 PS picnic. So we'll see if that lights a fire. So.
Good.
And aren't we also waiting, remind me of the walkability consultant plan, the sidewalks plan?
That's it.
That's with the school, that's called the schools.
It's the pedestrian master plan and safe routes to school plan.
And associated with that is the item 6 in the agenda, the Ad hoc Subcommittee on Crosswalks and Pedestrian Safety, which is in conjunction with the Commission and the Code Enforcement and Public Works Committee, and the status there is the same. We won't be moving ahead until the consultant is in place. So. Ad hoc Subcommittee on Bicycle Routes and Cycling, Commissioner Flanagan.
Nothing to add.
Okay.
So I'll just report that I did give the update information for the map to our consultant, so hopefully we'll have that soon.
To David.
Yeah.
Dixon.
Ad hoc Subcommittee on Night Sky, Vice Chair McCann and Commissioner Flanagan.
So briefly, the issue before us is to take, so I've been looking at 3 different documents. One of them is the City of Palm Springs today has a code, municipal code on outdoor lighting standards. And so the issue is, how far does it go to preserve dark skies? And how does it compare to 2 other documents that we've been looking at? One of them is standard lighting ordinance that's been put out by the International Dark Sky Association as kind of a blueprint for cities to adopt. And the other one is I've been looking at the city of Tucson's, which is fairly stringent because Kitt Peak is nearby. So the question is, what are the deltas between these? How far can we get, and how much enforcement are we doing of the current Palm Springs lighting standards? And I don't want to go into a lot of detail here. We're going to do some more work on this over the next month. But basically, what I've been finding out is the existing regulation in Palm Springs, it doesn't go far enough in terms of its stringency and the number of lumens that lighting in Palm Springs it should be restricted to. It doesn't go far enough in restricting the larger light sources to be fully shielded so that none of the light is going straight up into the sky. And the third thing is that if we are going to get pushback with existing uplighting, so you've all probably seen the uplighting, for example, that's lighting up our beautiful palm trees along Tahquitz Canyon. Those lights are incredibly bright, and they're just broadcasting light into the sky. If we're going to get feedback, because some of these other cities have much more stringent restrictions that would pretty much preclude that kind of thing from happening, then we should look at curfews, because the other cities have them, we do not, and that might be a compromise, is that, okay, you can light up your palm trees and everything you want and throw all this light into the sky, but you have to turn them off at either 10 or 11 p.m. So there's much more, but there's just a snapshot of what we've been up to.
Okay. Thank you. The next item is bighorn sheep habitat protection. Commissioner Flanagan.
Yeah, we've worked on, I've been working with the ranger program to train some more rangers, and we've had some issues with codes and enforcement. And you mentioned that we could get some codes and enforcement staff out to come out for a day with us at some point, with them?
I don't
at
know
some
if they
point?
could spare a whole day, but
Oh,
maybe an hour in the morning.
Yeah, for an hour, okay. I think that would be necessary, so
Yeah.
that would be great.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing to do.
And then I worked with a teacher at the Palm Springs Unified School District to put together a video. Do we have, it's a 3-minute video. Do we have time to see it?
Sure.
Okay. Then- So she did this as a professional development tech assignment. She did it with some students, and they all came out and they were interested in the ranger program, so this is what they ended up with.
Gonna go on a hike. Such a beautiful day. Excited, Sunny? Excited? Ready? Let's go.
Oh, wait.
Wait. Those are signs. The one that wasn't, that
No
was,
dogs allowed on the trail.
that
When
has
did
now
this
been
happen?
torn off, actually day before yesterday.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Sunny. We're gonna get to the bottom of this.
Lurking.
Morning.
How you doing?
Good. How are
Wonderful.
you?
Doing well, thanks. You looking to go for a hike with your dog?
Yeah, I am actually. Yes, we go on this trail all the time.
Nice. Are you aware of the new ordinance that was passed through the city a few months back?
Well, I was. I just saw the sign, but my dog's good. She doesn't bother anybody, and she
Yeah.
won't bother the sheep.
Yeah, I understand. I have this card here that explains a little bit as to why the dogs aren't allowed on the trail. And it basically states that the coyotes are a predator to the sheep. And it says, due to the endangered bighorn sheep, the presence of the dogs acclimates sheep to canine predators so they don't respond the way they should when they see a coyote. And I'm Scott Collins, volunteer ranger with the Palm Springs Volunteer Ranger Program that they just implemented. The Trail Rangers volunteer program was implemented to help educate the public with a new city ordinance that was put in place at the end of October, banning all dogs on the trails within the Palm Springs city limits. So our role is not to enforce, but to help educate the dog walkers and the public in general about proper trail etiquette and the reason that dogs aren't allowed on the trail due to the bighorn sheep habitat.
Sunny and I really enjoy coming on these hikes. It's just nice to come out in nature and have the fresh air.
The dog walkers have taken well to the new ordinance. They're very receptive to the reason why it was implemented due to the bighorn sheep habitat. And the community in general has been wonderful with other hikers spreading the word. On the flip side, there's been maybe 1 or 2 situations where I've come across someone who was a little resistant to the new ordinance.
Well, when I first saw the no dogs ordinance posted, I was a little irritated because I just wanted to bring my dog out here for a nice walk, and now I was inconvenienced a little bit and didn't know the reasoning behind it. But once the ranger explained it to me, I understood and think it's a good thing. So where am I supposed to hike with my dog?
Well, unfortunately, within the city limits of Palm Springs, there aren't any hiking trails that are available with dogs, but you can go on the National Monument website and the city of Palm Springs, and they have other trails that are dog-friendly.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the information.
You're welcome. Have a good day and enjoy your hike.
I will. All right, Sunny, ready to go to the preserve? Let's go.
What the Rangers want to share with the public, in essence, is that we want people to come out and enjoy the trails and to experience the wonderful landscape that they have outside their back doors. And at the same token, to be aware of the sensitive wildlife and habitat that we live in, and specifically with the bighorn sheep, to make sure that we live in a coexisting manner and that the sheep thrive and survive, at the same token that humans can enjoy not only seeing the wildlife, but also the wonderful scenery that all the trails have to offer.
So there it is. I have a box of these cards. If anyone is a hiker and wants to grab a handful,
I
They're
would
not-
suggest you would edit the cards.
these are Jane made the cards.
Well,
I would agree.
I'm just saying they're not accurate.
The fine amount is off.
Yeah.
She's gonna do, when she does another box, I'll mention that to her.
Okay.
It is the beginning of the lambing season, and Scott, that's this guy that you see, he's all the amazing pictures that you see if you're Oswald Canyon members. Scott's the one that takes all those pictures, and so he just sent me a picture today of a baby lamb that was just born, they think in the last couple weeks. One of the things I did point out there was there aren't trails in the city of Palm Springs. That's something the city should probably work on due to the huge amount of hikers that show up at these trails every day. I think that would be really important. There are a couple places we do send people onto the Araby Wash, which is a great place to take your dogs, and the Henderson Trail, which are kind of unofficial, and then also right along the Riverside County Flood Control, which says no dogs, but there's thousands of people walking on that path, sort of over by the stables at the end of Toledo. That's another place we send people, so. But
What about the CVAG trail? I mean, the CV Link.
I think that's bicycles and wheeled vehicles
Pets
mostly.
too?
I don't know if it's pets as much as.
Yeah.
I think they like the gated in area of the, next to the wash. The Araby Wash is probably the best spot to take. The other ones are Whitewater Wash, which is just outside city limits. And the website, our website actually lists some other places, so. I mean, I think we're going to take this off the agenda calendar going forward.
I think
Unless
you've
there's
accomplished
any
everything that you set out
questions.
to.
Well, I hope so. And also, we have more of those ranger shirts if anybody wants to volunteer. It's actually funner than it sounds if you hike at all, because for the most part, people are glad to hear it. And I think the number of dogs on the trails has fallen dramatically. There are a couple of people that are adamant about going anyways, and we just kind of let them go. But hopefully that'll change in the future. So I think that's it from us.
Thank you, Commissioner Flanagan. Next is water conservation.
Okay, at this morning's CWA board meeting, the directors briefly discussed the city's airport turf conversion project, and that was in light of some materials for the DWA board meeting that noted the project will likely to be pushed to the next fiscal year. And I informed the board that the project was moving forward and that we would be getting an update from Patrick on the RFP responses at the Savings Commission meeting. So I think Ashley was aware of this, but not necessarily the full board. So I brought the full board saying, yes, we're working on it. And, you know, more things. And so the board members were appreciative that things were moving forward. Particularly Director Ewing, because he used to be the city planning director, and he was aware of those discussions from way back when. Next, the DWA board got its monthly water conservation figures for December. There was a 17.4% reduction in potable water production compared with same month in 2013. Cumulative savings over the last 12-month period is 19.7%, and in every month except September, water consumption was less in 2019 than 2018. cumulative savings since beginning of June 2016, when the DWA put its 10 to 13% target in place to 17.3%. So you never know, because it's not rained perhaps as much as we got a lot of rain last year, but so far, really, the folks in Palm Springs have been really stepping up on that, and DWA is pushing the grants, and there's a landscape grant for folks who want to do their turf conversion. There's an up to $500 landscape grant as part of that, so that's something new. So that's it on river conservation.
Thank you. Wellness, we don't have Commissioner Baker here, so we'll wait till next month. And finally, Desert Community Energy Community Advisory Committee.
Okay, two things from the board meeting, one in response to Commissioner Miller's comment from a little bit before. So the board met at the Police Training Center on January 13th, approved the rates for the carbon-free at roughly 10% more than the current SE base rate, and the Desert Saver rate will be a teeny bit less than the current SC rate. The people will be able to opt into that if they will. So that was one key decision. And the other key decision was on the solar customers, because that had not been decided by the board when they originally planned to launched DC in August of 2018. They held off notifying the solar customers, and then there was a question of when that was going to be. I pushed them at the December board meeting to make the decision in January. The staff report suggested either not doing it all and doing further research, or waiting until May 2021. There are currently 3,781 solar customers in Palm Springs. I think nearly all of them would be residential. And I said that would be a large percentage of people not to be part of DCE. So the board agreed. And so solar folks will be rolled into the system roughly towards the end of May. And that's based on the staff recommendation that May is the best time to do a true-up period, because you'll have essentially accumulated a large amount of credits in the spring. And I confirmed that because coincidentally, that's when my interconnect was. And I get, I sort of make it all back in March and April, because we got lots of sun and not using the air conditioning. So those were the key things from the board meeting. Then we had the Community Advisory Committee meeting, and a couple of things there. Also unrelated to the board meeting is that Mayor Coors has asked that there be additional input from the five of us from Palm Springs. So that will come before the DC board at their next meeting on February 24th. And what we're likely to see is the five of us will be asked to provide additional input to the DC board and the city with Patrick, and there may be an expansion, whether it's temporary or permanent, I don't know, but getting more folks in from the community to represent areas that the five of us don't necessarily represent, particularly in the District 1 areas, because those are none of us from the five, I believe, are currently live in District 1. So that'll come there. We also discussed, as Patrick mentioned, the utility discount program, and that'll go to council on the 30th, how they want to do that. And then finally, we got an update from Hector Sanchez Perez on the utility discount program, which went live. And Patrick, I have some brochures for you. And Hector was at the 1 PS meeting to discuss the program, made some good community input. Mayor Coors was supposed to be there. He wasn't feeling well, so he'll be doing an update on DC at the February 1 PS meeting. So that's it for me. Do you have anything else to add?
So how many, did you get a few of those?
Microphone?
Yeah, I'm so excited to see those. You just, looks like you just have three.
Give to Patrick, but Hector has lots more.
Okay. Well, they've been a little stingy coming this way, some of that paperwork.
And you may have some extras left over from the you may have some extras left over from the 1 PS meeting. I think he brought some over, so Patrick may have some as well. But, Hector has these, and if you could drop them over the lobby, that would be a good place to do that. And then I asked Hector to coordinate with you getting a digital version of this for the Office of Sustainability.
Thank you. So the final item on the agenda is commissioner comments and upcoming agenda development. So we'll go quickly around the table and to see if anybody has anything else to add or anything else for the agenda for the February meeting. I've taken notes as I've gone along, and Patrick and I will start working on the agenda soon. Co-Chair McCann.
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Flanagan.
Nothing from me, but can we get an update on, are there new commission staff member approvals coming, or? I was talking to Jason on the way out, I wasn't sure what the status was on those.
No, we haven't.
Those are just pending, okay.
Yes.
That's nothing then.
Okay. Commissioner Miller? Okay. Commissioner Gauthier? Commissioner Garrett?
Couple things. With the World Environmental Day coming up, we really have to have that mostly done by the beginning of April in terms of being able to get things to the press so we can get coverage for it and block out time with media and that. So it's not that far off in the future. In fact, it's coming down. And with that, and even though it still hasn't been officially said, and Melbourne will be hosting, and that'll be right at the end of their summer season. So who knows, what they'll have suffered by then. But I've done some initial outreach trying to contact the people in Melbourne who are going to be volunteering and working with that and seeing if we can do an exchange, like city to city, with the young people here in particular. And if the theme is going to be, or that we will be working with the idea of protecting the pollinators and all of the efforts that have gone into creating habitat and milkweed and fly space and all of that for the monarchs and all of the other pollinators, which we depend on, it's a very deep concern for me with products, particularly Roundup in that category, is available. I'm sure you're all aware that the city of Malibu just recently banned it entirely for any use at all. And there was a legal way that they found that out. So I grew up in Malibu Canyon, and a longtime associate of mine was an ex-city council member, so I've reached out to him to see, and he thinks that there may be a way, because even though we're not coastal, and I think the legal case that they made was that Malibu is on the beach, so there were some regulations that they were able to use to ban that. But he felt because we're a resort area, and even though we're not on the coast, we have a lot of similarities, so we may be able to use what they use to leverage the ban. So, how can we allow that? And we go to such great efforts to protect the pollinators, and yet that is commonly used. In fact, just last week, there was kind of a big to-do because somebody was spraying it right at the base of the hiking trails. Why? Why? With people and dogs walking there, and what would be the point of it? It's rocks. So it was kind of insane, and the level of ignorance was really stunning, far more than I thought it would be. Where many people just think, what's the big deal? It's it's just spray or it's nothing. But if Malibu can do that, I think we would have a good chance. So if I can pull from my associate what he thinks would be useful, and then maybe take it, let the legal people look at it and see if we can make a case here in the desert and in Palm Springs, so we can, rid ourselves of this sinister poison once and for all.
I'm having a little hard time understanding, what is the case that you would be trying to make? Can you be?
banning of Roundup and similar, that category of weapons?
Chair Clark, can I
Yes.
suggest that we put that as an agenda item for a future
Yes,
meeting,
okay.
and then we can discuss it at that time?
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
I think that's an excellent idea.
It's a big goal, but it's one I would really like to pursue.
And we've had some discussion about Roundup in the past, and the city has agreed to stop using it. Is that right? Right, okay. So we'll add that to the agenda, and we'll contact you. Okay. Commissioner Friedman.
There is one point that I didn't mention before under green building solar. In the memo that I prepared for the November meeting in connection with discussion of the EV charging project that Patrick has been working on, there's a legislation from 2015, AB 1236, and it requires cities and counties with a population of less than 200,000 residents who adopt an ordinance by September 30, 2017, that creates an expedited and streamlined permitting process for electric vehicle charging stations. So this would be if a private developer, Miralon, for example, says, okay, we want to put some EV chargers up for our residents. And so we need sort of a streamlined process for this, just as there is for solar. That was AB 2188, and it just sort of didn't happen. So in my ordinance bag of tricks, that's one that I'll work on. I can't guarantee it's February, because I'd have to put it for green building solar first. So if it's not February, but it'll be, soon, and it's already 2.5 years late. So probably another month won't kill us, but I'd like to get that there because that is a good pendant to the fact that the city is doing it, and then any private developer, if you want to do it, it'll be quick and easy for you to do so. I need just do some research. There's probably a model ordinance that I can find from some of my resources, and I'll get working on that.
Thank you. So you'll remind us about that next month after your committee meets.
Yeah, we'll, if we're ready for that for February, I'll let you know, but I'm not necessarily counting that it's a February agenda item.
Okay, great. Thank you. So our next meeting will be February 18th at 5 p.m. Thank you all for a productive meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.